Hey, but how long do you think this dynasty will last? You heard Patrick Mahomes asked there about the odds to win the Super Bowl next season. The Chiefs currently with the second best odds there at plus 650 behind the 49ers, who of course were the runner-ups in this year's championship game. But like I said before, can't count out the Chiefs ever. Let's welcome in the guys from Sportsline, Todd Fuhrman and Larry Hartstein, to talk about these odds. Guys, we just saw it. It's obviously way too early to know anything concrete about 2024. But if I did have to wager on a team right here, right now, I'm betting on Mahomes because, like, have we not learned anything about those guys this year? Todd, you see there the Chiefs with the second best odds. Is that where they belong at this point in this year after what they've just accomplished?
I mean, look, I'm not going to discount this team ever again. I mean, look at what they've been able to do. We wrote them off for dead a couple of years ago when they had to replace Tyreek Hill. They continue to go out there and exceed expectations. And this past season, the offense wasn't up to the abnormally high standards of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So what do? They have the best defense that we've seen from Kansas City as a franchise since the late 90s. So discount this team at your own peril. But the interesting part about looking at the prices there, Haley, you could have found a better price on the Kansas City Chiefs late in the regular season than you would nearly 365 days in advance. So I wouldn't be running to the window to bet them just yet, even if you do believe that the Chiefs should be the overwhelming favorite, despite being second on the big board behind the 49ers as things stand right now.
Yeah, I'm also not going to discount the Kansas City Chiefs after what they did coming back from another double-digit deficit. But there was some extreme fumble luck in that Super Bowl. And looking at that defense that was lights out during the postseason, holding the top 4 offenses in football under 16 points a game in their last 4 games. Will Chris Jones be back? Will L'Jarius Sneed be back? Will Mike Dana be back? Those are some big names on that defense that was the youngest in the entire NFL. So even though, yes, they will be back in the mix with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, I'm not ready to say that they're going to make it 3 in a row.
All righty. I'm going to remember this conversation this time next year, guys, whenever they're playing in that Super Bowl. On the other side, though, something I did find interesting, the Niners were favored in all of the games they played this season. Obviously, Vegas still likes them to win next year in the Super Bowl. Todd, what's the logic there with the Niners, and do you agree?
So when you look at their overall power profile, this team was a rightful favorite, although they underwhelmed in the 3 most important games of the season. When you look at the numbers where they were laying double digits against the Green Bay Packers, slipped by them in the playoffs. The Detroit Lions, they closed as right around a touchdown favorite, didn't get there then. And of course, in the biggest game of all, they come up just short. But Larry mentioned fumble luck, and I think that game could have very easily gone a different direction if Dre Greenlaw doesn't have the non-contact, non-football injury to his Achilles. Early on in that contest, that defense was playing downhill. Deebo Samuel nicked up, George Kittle, and what a different narrative it would have been if the 49ers were able to take a 2nd and 4, bleed the clock down, and allow Jake Moody to kick the game-winning field goal at the end of regulation. So odds makers paying proper respects to the 49ers here, but the main reason that they're the favorites, other than power ratings that'll get adjusted before next season, you look at the landscape in the NFC, and it's anybody's best guess in terms of who the best teams on that side of the draw will be compared to the AFC, where the rich seem to get richer, and all we keep doing is adding elite head coaches and better quarterback play to that stockpile.
And having a cheap quarterback like Brock Purdy enables you to build such a dominant roster up and down the lineup, and that's why the 49ers are rightfully the favorites. But there's no way I could trust Kyle Shanahan with some of those late game decisions. I mean, first of all, at the end of the first half, not using any timeouts, letting the Chiefs use up the final 4 minutes of the first half and then get the ball in the second half. And then in overtime, not deciding to take a field goal when you could have gone for it, try to get the touchdown. Even if you don't get the touchdown, you have the Chiefs backed up inside the 10. If you stop them, you still win the game with the field goal. So there's no way I could back Kyle Shanahan at such a low price.
Yeah, that picture that we just showed of him on the graphic with like the football in his hands is just like what every Niners fan is feeling right now. A lot of emotion out there in San Francisco. Obviously, the Super Bowl just ended, but I'm going to put you guys on the spot here. We're going from Vegas to New Orleans, really leaning into that gambling trend we've seen in the NFL lately. Caesars Superdome set to host Super Bowl 59. Larry, I'll go to you first here. Who are you picking to win next year's Super Bowl just one day after we wrapped up this year's?
I'm picking the guy that Chris Jones said right after the game was the best team in football, hands down. He said that was the Baltimore Ravens. The Chiefs felt very fortunate to get by the Baltimore Ravens, who, according to DVOA, one of the best analytic tools out there, they were one of the top 5 teams in NFL history. They blew out so many elite opponents, and then they get to the AFC title game and they go -3 in turnovers. Zay Flowers fumbles at the goal line, and they still had a chance to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And I just imagine all the Ravens and Ravens fans watching Patrick Mahomes run for 66 yards in the Super Bowl, thinking about what Lamar Jackson could do in that scenario. They have to sign Justin Madubuike, 13 sacks at the defensive tackle position, only 26 years old. Will they be able to bring back Patrick Queen? That's a big question. But other than that, I mean, this core is basically intact. They are loaded. Lamar is still in his prime. I'll take the Ravens.
Oh, Larry, a lot of reasons to be excited about that roster. I think the biggest question I have for Baltimore is what the defensive side will look like. You talked about some of the player defections. Let's see how easily they're able to replace Mike McDonald. I'll go a little bit further down the list, and a team that I think arrived a year ahead of schedule in the NFC, because I think the path in that conference is a little bit more fortuitous than what you have to go through in the AFC, and that'll be the Green Bay Packers at a price of 25-1. Look, I may be buying the Jordan Love hype train, but I love what I saw from Green Bay down the stretch. Larry mentioned how young that Kansas City Chiefs team was defensively. Well, Green Bay is the perfect counterpart on the offensive side, where they had a ton of receivers that had just 1 to 2 years of experience. Let's see what they elect to do with Aaron Jones. I have to imagine they're going to try and keep him. I know he still has some time left on his deal, but defensively, that's where I think Green Bay can get better. Jair Alexander remains the big question if he's going to continue to be a member of this organization. But you go out and you bring in former BC head coach Jeff Hafley to take over as defensive coordinator from Joe Barry, and you look at what Hafley has done at stops along the way, albeit at the college ranks, and I think he did more with less for BC on the defensive side. We saw what he meant to Ohio State as well, and I think the Green Bay Packers, in a division that'll be a little bit better than people think, but playing in a softer NFC draw than the AFC, make an awful lot of sense for me at 25-1. I think Jordan Love's the real deal, and I'm willing to buy in about 365 days before we get to New Orleans.
So maybe we see a Packers-Ravens Super Bowl next year, and then you guys will both be right at that. Let's talk about a value pick here, guys. Todd, I want to go to you first here. You've gotten this right a couple times in the past, including the Bucs prior to them signing Tom Brady in the offseason a few years ago. So we're going to lean on you here, and then we'll go to Larry. Who are you going with this time for a value pick?
So when you're looking further down the board this far out, for me, value probably starts with that 50-1 price range or greater. And I was a little bit surprised to see a team that basically cleaned up at the NFL awards getting disrespected in the futures market, who should get their starting quarterback back under center to start the 2024 campaign. And that would be in the same division as the Baltimore Ravens, but the Cleveland Browns. I know this roster won't be constructed the exact same, but they dealt with a ton of bad luck on the injury side, not just at the quarterback position, but along the offensive line. This was a defense in Jim Schwartz's first year that overachieved some, although they were a bit of a paper tiger. I think if you're able to maintain some of those key injuries and keep them to a minimum, knowing how much of their salary cap was actually on season-ending IR when they played the Houston Texans in the postseason. Kevin Stefanski's a heck of a coach, stays committed to his principles. You could do a lot worse than betting the Cleveland Browns this far out at a price tag of 50-1.
Todd talked about how wide open the NFC is, and I'll go take a team that might have won it this year if things had gone a little bit differently in Detroit. That's the LA Rams. They only lost one game the second half of the season. That was on an overtime punt return at Baltimore, and then they lose by 1 point in Detroit. I don't think anyone would have been shocked to see them beat the 49ers and end up playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. And Todd, you know, they have something different this year they haven't had in 7 years, and that's a first-round draft pick. They also have salary cap space, which they haven't had in forever, over $35 million. And the core, Stafford, Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, those guys, when they're healthy, this is one of the best offenses in the NFL. In a wide-open NFC, I'll take the Rams at 30-1.
I'm a little disappointed as a Cowboys fan that I didn't hear the Cowboys were going to be in the Super Bowl next year. So you guys are hurting my feelings, but I understand what you're saying.
Haley, well, When we look at the Cowboys, look, we can't set you up for failure and false hope.
No.
We know that they're the perennial underachievers, that we go in believing the glitz and glamour, and inevitably they stub their toe in those dreaded first-round playoff matchups.
Listen, we know. We know they are always disappointing, but you guys are never disappointing. We always appreciate getting your insight here on the gambling side of things. Todd Fuhrman and Larry Hartstein giving us some way too early predictions for Super Bowl 59 next year in New Orleans. Hey, whether you root for the Chiefs, the Niners, or even the Dallas Cowboys like myself that might never make it back to the Super Bowl, we can all be winners with Sportsline. You can use that promo code WINNERS for 60% off an annual plan, and now is the best time to strengthen that betting knowledge with the Super Bowl being back in New Orleans next year.